There are 6 things you need to avoid until you've actually built real wealth. If you're doing even one of these right now, you're not just slowing down, you're actively pushing yourself further away from financial freedom. So if you're serious about building wealth and want to get there a lot faster, stick around. Starting from thing number 6, don't upgrade your lifestyle every time you get a raise. When you get a raise or hit a bigger payday, the instinct is to immediately upgrade your apartment or buy new electronics or new clothes. But here's the trap. Your savings rate stays completely flat. If your income goes up by 20%, but your spending also goes up by 20%, you're literally in the exact same spot you started. You're not any closer to financial freedom. Instead, I want you to save the raise. I actually have a video talking about savings rate and how it's the single most important factor that determines how many years you need to reach financial freedom. If you're interested, check out this link here after watching this video. Okay, anyway, I want you to save the raise. Keep your living expenses right where they are. Pretend that extra money doesn't exist and dump 100% of it straight into your investments. That's how you shortcut your way to real wealth. Next, thing number 5, freeze your expensive hobbies. We all have things we love doing. Maybe it's hitting the golf course, going skiing, horseback riding, or buying high-end camera gear. These are amazing hobbies, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to enjoy them. But they're a lot more fun when your investment portfolio is paying for them, not your paycheck. From a cash flow perspective, the biggest danger of expensive hobbies is the heavy recurring costs before you've built a solid financial foundation. Every dollar spent on high-maintenance hobbies in your 20s or early wealth-building years is a dollar that loses decades of compound growth. For example, hobbies like horseback riding or golf often have ongoing fees like stabling, club dues, equipment upgrades, and greens fees. $300 per month spent on hobby fees at age 25 equals over $550,000 in lost compound growth by age 60, assuming an annualized 8% average market return, which is about the same if you invest into the S&P 500 index fund in the past 30 years. So if building wealth is your priority, let expensive hobbies wait for a bit. Put that cash to work today so it can pay for your fun tomorrow. Okay, coming in at thing number 4, stop financing toys. Boats, brand new luxury cars, high-end watches, expensive furniture. Here is my simple rule. If it doesn't make you money or go up in value, never pay interest on it. But what if you can't pay cash? Still don't buy it. Not until your investments can pay for it, instead of your paycheck. Well, look at it this way. Before you're rich, every single dollar you have is like a soldier working for you on the front lines to build your wealth. Every time you blow your cash on luxury item, you're taking a soldier out of the fight. So even if you can't afford the monthly payment, or even if you have the full cash sitting in your bank account, hold off. Put those dollars to work until you hit real financial freedom, where your assets cover all of your living expenses and leave you with extra cash. That's when you know it's time to buy luxuries. Never buy luxuries with earned income. Buy them with investment income. Let's jump to rule number 3 before you get rich. Don't buy a vacation home unless it's generating serious positive cash flow. From a pure wealth building standpoint, buying a second home before you are financially independent is almost always a huge trap. It looks like an asset, but it's usually just a massive liability. Vacation homes carry far higher costs than primary homes. For example, beach houses or mountain cabins often have higher property taxes and homeowner insurance because of windstorm, flood, wildfire, or other risks. Plus, because you're not there daily, small issues like a minor pipe leak can turn into a $10,000 disaster. Also, once you own a vacation home, you feel financially obligated to vacation on the same exact spot every time to get your money's worth. If you spend $2,000 a month to upkeep a vacation home in Florida, but spend $4,000 to take your family to Hawaii instead, you'll feel guilty as if your money's wasted. You might think, well, I can just list it on Airbnb when I'm not using it to cover the mortgage and all the expenses. But before you do that, do the math. Cleaning fees, local permit costs, property management, gas damages, and constant maintenance add up fast. If you say, well, it's in a great location, so I'll just charge a higher rate, but the exact weeks you want to use the house, like holidays, long weekends, or peak summers, are the exact same weeks guests would pay the highest prices. You either sacrifice rental income or sacrifice your own vacation time. Now, when does a vacation home actually make sense before you're rich? Only when you buy it strictly as a cash-flowing rental property in a high-demand market, run it like a business, and treat your own visits as an occasional bonus when it's unbooked. On to rule number 2, don't make investing complicated. Investing does not need to be complicated. Please don't feel like you have to understand options, futures, or different types of insurance before starting to invest. But here's the problem. Banks and insurance companies want you to think that it's complicated. Why? Because complex products allow them to charge higher management fees, higher commissions, and other ongoing administrative fees. We'll take a classic example you've probably seen advertised. Products claiming to give you a capped 7 or 8% upside with 100% downside protection. Sounds amazing, right? If the market goes up, you make money, but only up to a certain limit. If the market crashes, you don't lose a single dime. Psychologically, it's very appealing, but banks and insurance companies are not charities. There's no free lunch. And here's a possibility of how they actually put this off with your money. Say you hand them $100,000, they take $85,000 of it and throw it into ultra-safe bonds, which grow at 4% each year. After 5 years, that $85,000 grows back to over $100,000, and this guarantees your original $100,000 back. At the same time, they take the remaining $15,000 and buy risky market options. Now, suppose the stock market explodes and goes up 20%. Because your gain is capped at 7%, you only get 7%. You just give up 13% of pure profit straight to the company. On top of that, they often keep all cash dividends for themselves. Stock market pays out dividends, and many of these types of products don't pass it on to you. If you want out, they charge you steep surrender fees when you try to pull your money out early. They might also hide behind confusing contract jargon like spreads and participation rates, things you never heard of, but can definitely eat your investment returns. Of course, obviously, this is a simplified example, but you get a point. Complex products are not financial magic. For most people, simple investing beats complicated investing. On average, over the last 30 years, simple index funds like S&P 500 returned around 10% annualized. And with a low-cost index fund like that, you get almost all of that return. So if history repeats itself and you can hold on to your investments for long term, then a good option is to stick to boring, highly liquid, and low-fee index funds. Finally, here's the number one thing to avoid before you're rich. Do not quit your day job too early. Everyone wants to be their own boss. They all want freedom, flexible hours, and zero office politics. But in most cases, your stable income is the engine that funds your investing and your business experiments. And in reality, most successful founders keep their day jobs until their side business is fully proven, profitable, and ready to stand on its own. Pierre Omidyar is the founder of eBay. He treated it as a side project until the income generated from eBay exceeded his salary. He then quit his engineering job to focus on eBay full-time. Phil Knight is the founder of Nike. He was a full-time accountant and assistant professor. He didn't quit his job the moment he sold his first pair of shoes. He stayed in accounting and teaching for 5 years while building the business, and only went all in when the business had grown enough to support a full-time operation. The thing is, if you quit a traditional job for entrepreneurship before building a solid financial cushion, you risk turning what should be an exciting venture into a high-stress survival test. You're forced to accept toxic clients, low-profit jobs, or work outside of your target niche just to cover next week's rent. When you do have some revenue, you can't invest in long-term growth like branding, better tools, or key software because every dollar must go toward immediate living expenses, which by that time is probably more than you thought because, for example, you must then fully fund your individual health insurance with zero company contributions. And any sick days, holidays, and vacations are 100% out-of-pocket loss of revenue. And this is already a very good situation because we assume that you do make revenue right away. But in many real cases, for most new businesses that later become successful, they follow a J curve. In the initial phase, there are only costs, no revenue, if it does take off later. Well, I'm definitely not discouraging you from quitting your day job and starting a business. I'm just saying that while you still have a day job and want to start your own business, instead of seeing your day job as a trap holding you back, treat it as your first investor. If you can, keep your steady income while building on the side. You can validate your business ideas, set pricing that shows your value, and build a customer base without worrying about paying your personal bills. Every dollar your business earns can be pulled straight back into it rather than paying for your groceries, so your business can scale much faster. So when do you quit your day job? Each person's risk tolerance is different, and this is only my personal take, not financial advice. But usually, when your side revenue consistently covers 100 to 150% of your baseline living expenses for 3 to 6 consecutive months, that's when you know it's about the time. If you found this video helpful, do me a big favor and hit that like button so the algorithm can share it with more people. And if you want to keep building your wealth, you're definitely going to want to watch this video right here next. I'll see you there.